A Filipino girl was challenged to play the piano just for fun seconds later. No one in the school could believe what they witnessed. Hidden talents emerged, family secrets were revealed, and their lives changed forever in ways no one could have predicted. A story of rediscovery, reconciliation, and the universal language of music. Get ready because this story will touch your heart. Subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and comment where you're watching from. An uncomfortable silence fell over the auditorium of Lincoln Academy in Boston when Mrs. Peterson, with a condescending smile, invited Maya Santos, the new Filipino exchange student, to entertain them for a bit on the piano that remained covered in the corner of the stage. It had been barely 2 weeks since Maya's arrival, a 12-year-old girl with expressive eyes and carefully braided hair who barely spoke English and remained quiet during classes, causing some teachers to mistakenly assume she had learning difficulties. For Ms. Eleanor Williams, the 68-year-old custodian who discreetly observed while cleaning the side hallways, something in the girl's gaze seemed strangely familiar. There was something about her small but determined hands, in the way she slightly tilted her head when listening attentively. It was as if the elderly woman recognized an untold story in those subtle gestures. "Just so we can get to know you better," insisted Mrs. Peterson in a tone that provoked giggles among the students. "Don't worry if you only know Mary had a little lamb or something simple." Maya walked slowly toward the piano, her school shoes resonating on the wooden floor. Carefully, she removed the red velvet cover that protected the old Steinway, an instrument donated decades ago by an anonymous benefactor and rarely properly used. As she sat down, she adjusted the bench with the naturalness of someone who perfectly knows the height needed to comfortably reach the pedals. The first chord of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor resonated with such clarity that Mrs. Peterson dropped her tablet, causing a crash that no one seemed to notice. Within seconds, Maya's hands were gliding over the keys with a precision and emotion that completely transformed the atmosphere. It wasn't just perfect technique, it was passion translated into music. It was history told through each note. Ms. Williams dropped her broom, bringing a hand to her chest as silent tears began to roll down her wrinkled cheeks. What no one at the school knew was that Maya Santos wasn't simply an exchange student. She was the granddaughter of Margaret Connor, once known as the Pearl of Boston, a prodigious American pianist who had traveled to the Philippines in the 1980s for a concert and had stayed after falling in love. Margaret had established a music school in Manila that had become a respected institution, but her connection with America had faded over time, becoming merely rumors and blurry memories. After the performance, the entire auditorium sat in stunned silence before erupting into applause. Mrs. Peterson approached Maya with wide eyes, her earlier condescension replaced with genuine awe. "Maya, that was extraordinary. Where did you learn to play like that?" The girl looked down at her hands, a hint of a smile playing at her lips. "My grandmother teach me," she replied in halting English. "She very famous pianist." Long time ago, for the first time since arriving at Lincoln Academy, Maya felt something other than loneliness. The piano had spoken for her when words couldn't, bridging the gap between cultures with a universal language everyone understood. As the students crowded around her with newfound respect, Ms. Williams watched from the distance, her heart racing with a suspicion she couldn't yet confirm. The following morning, Maya arrived at school to find a small crowd gathered around the bulletin board. Principal Jenkins had posted an announcement. Due to Maya's extraordinary performance, the school would be organizing a special recital to showcase student talents, with the Filipino exchange student as the highlight. "I can't believe it," whispered Jennifer, a blonde 8th grader who had previously ignored Maya in the hallways. "She plays like she should be at Carnegie Hall or something." Maya ducked her head, uncomfortable with the sudden attention. She made her way to her locker where she found Ms. Williams waiting, nervously clutching a faded photograph. "Excuse me, dear," the elderly custodian said softly. "I hope you don't mind my asking, but your grandmother, is her name Margaret by any chance?" "Margaret Connor?" Maya's eyes widened in surprise. "Yes, how you know my Lola Margaret?" "Ms." Williams' hands trembled as she showed Maya the yellowed photograph of 2 young women seated at a piano, their heads bent together over the keys, identical expressions of joy on their faces. "Because, my dear, I was her best friend. We studied together at the New England Conservatory. I recognized her touch in your playing. No one phrases Chopin quite like Margaret. The connection was instant." "In Ms." William's small apartment that weekend, Maya discovered a treasure trove of memories. Concert programs featuring her grandmother's name, newspaper clippings praising Boston's rising star, and dozens of letters exchanged over decades. These were pieces of her grandmother's life she had never known about, chapters untold. Lola never talked much about Boston, Maya explained, as she carefully turned pages of an old scrapbook. She say it was complicated. It was, Ms. Williams confirmed with a sigh. Your grandmother was destined for greatness here, but she followed her heart to the Philippines instead. The music world here never quite forgave her for choosing love over career. As Maya practiced in the school auditorium each afternoon, her confidence grew. Ms. Williams often sat in the back row, offering gentle guidance on technique and interpretation. Their shared connection to Margaret created a bridge across generations, giving Maya an unexpected ally in this strange new world. News of the young prodigy spread quickly through the local music community. When Ms. Williams mentioned Maya's talent to her friend at the Boston Globe, a reporter was dispatched to interview the Filipino piano sensation with Boston roots. The article, published with a photo of Maya at the Steinway, caught the attention of Robert Connor, who had been scrolling through the Sunday paper at his Cape Cod home. He nearly spilled his coffee when he saw the girl's face, a younger version of his estranged sister. "It can't be," he whispered, tracing the outline of Maya's face on the newspaper page. After all these years, Robert Connor stood nervously at the back of Lincoln Academy's auditorium, clutching the newspaper article that had led him here. He hadn't spoken to his sister Margaret in over 30 years, not since their disagreement about the family's music legacy. Now watching this young girl at the piano, a girl who looked so much like Margaret at that age, he felt a tightness in his chest. Maya's fingers danced across the keys as she played Scott Joplin's Maple Leaf Rag, with the same distinctive inflections that had characterized her grandmother's interpretation. The way she lingered on certain notes, the slight hesitation before a syncopated passage, it was unmistakably Margaret's influence. After the performance, Robert approached Ms. Williams, whom he recognized from the old days when she and Margaret had been inseparable. "Eleanor," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's been a long time." Ms. Williams stiffened at the sight of him. "Robert Connor, I never thought I'd see you again." Her tone was neither hostile nor welcoming. "Is she really Margaret's granddaughter?" "Yes, and she has all of Margaret's talent, perhaps more." Robert's eyes filled with tears. "I never knew she had a family. We lost touch after you accused her of abandoning your family's musical heritage," Ms. Williams finished for him. "Yes, I remember." Their conversation was interrupted by Maya herself, approaching with curious eyes. "Ms. Williams, who is this?" The elderly woman placed a gentle hand on Maya's shoulder. "Maya, this is Mr. Robert Connor. He's your grandmother's brother, your great-uncle." Maya's eyes widened. "I have family in America." The three sat in the school cafeteria long after everyone else had gone home. Robert explained the painful history, how the Connor family had been musicians for generations, how Margaret was expected to carry on the legacy in Boston, how her decision to stay in the Philippines after a concert tour had felt like a betrayal to the family tradition. "But I never stopped missing her," Robert admitted. "Pride kept me from reaching out, and then years passed and it seemed too late." "It's not too late," Maya said firmly. "Lola's still playing, even after her stroke. Not as good as before, but music still in her fingers." Robert looked up sharply. "Stroke? Margaret had a stroke?" Ms. Williams reached into her pocket and pulled out an envelope, the paper now soft with age. "She wrote to you, Robert, about 5 years ago, after her stroke. She asked me to mail it, but..." She hesitated. "I wasn't sure if it would help or hurt. She seemed so vulnerable in that letter, and you had been so harsh." Robert took the letter with unsteady hands. "You kept it all this time?" "I've kept everything of Margaret's. I think I was waiting for the right moment. And now with Maya here, it seems the circle is finally closing." As Robert read his sister's words of reconciliation, written in a slightly shaky hand, Maya played softly in the background a Filipino lullaby her grandmother had taught her, full of gentle melancholy and hope. Within a month of her arrival at Lincoln Academy, Maya's life had transformed completely. From being an overlooked foreign student struggling with English, she had become the central figure in the school's revitalized music program. Principal Jenkins, recognizing both her talent and the positive attention it brought to the school, had secured special funding to renovate the music department that had been neglected for years due to budget cuts. The school board was particularly impressed with your cultural exchange ideas, Principal Jenkins told Maya one afternoon as they toured the newly painted music room. Combining American classical training with Filipino musical traditions, it's exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need. Maya smiled shyly. Her English was improving rapidly now that she had found her confidence. In Philippines, my grandmother always say music is best bridge between cultures. Better than words. Mrs. Peterson, who had initially underestimated Maya, had become her most enthusiastic supporter. The music teacher had even begun taking piano lessons again, inspired by the young girl's passion. "I haven't practiced seriously in 20 years," Mrs. Peterson confessed during one of their after-school sessions. "I got so caught up in teaching theory that I forgot the joy of actually making music." Meanwhile, Robert Connor had integrated himself into Maya's life with a tentative gentleness, conscious of not overstepping boundaries. He attended all her performances, often bringing small gift sheet music, a metronome, a biography of Chopin. They spent weekends exploring Boston's musical landmarks, Symphony Hall, the New England Conservatory, the hidden jazz clubs that had been part of Margaret's youth. "Your grandmother used to sneak out to hear the jazz pianists," Robert told Maya, as they walked along Commonwealth Avenue one Saturday. "Our parents wanted her focused exclusively on classical music, but Margaret always said jazz taught her to feel the music, not just play the notes." As Boston's International Piano Festival approached, Maya faced a dilemma. Her parents had called from Manila with difficult news. Her grandmother's health had taken a turn, and they were considering bringing Maya back to the Philippines permanently. "But I have festival," Maya protested during their video call, tears streaming down her face. "And my new school, my friends, Uncle Robert and Ms. Williams." Her mother's face softened with understanding. "I know, Anak, but your Lola Margaret misses you terribly. The doctors say having you near might help her recovery." That night, unable to sleep, Maya sneaked down to the host family's living room and played softly on their upright piano, pouring her conflicted emotions into Debussy's Clair de Lune. She didn't notice Robert standing in the doorway until she finished the piece. "That was beautiful," he said quietly. "You play with your heart, just like Margaret always did." Maya wiped away tears. "My parents want me go home to Philippines." "Lola not doing well." Robert sat beside her on the bench. "I've been thinking about that. What if there was another option? I've spoken with your parents and the school. If you'd like, I could become your guardian here. You could continue your studies at Lincoln, compete in the festival, and we could arrange for Margaret to come to Boston for specialized treatment." Maya's eyes widened. "Lola could come here? To Boston?" "Yes. I've already contacted some specialists at Massachusetts General and..." He hesitated. "I've offered my home in Cape Cod. The sea air might be good for her recovery, and the piano room faces the ocean. She always loved that view." For the first time since receiving her parents' call, Maya felt hope blossoming. "You would do this? For Lola? After so many years?" Robert's eyes misted over. "Family is family, Maya. Sometimes it takes a child to remind adults of what really matters." As preparations for the International Piano Festival intensified, Maya discovered something extraordinary about the old Steinway at Lincoln Academy. While practicing late one evening, she noticed faint initials carved into a discreet corner of the instrument, MC. The realization hit her like a thunderbolt. This wasn't just any donated piano. It had belonged to her grandmother, Margaret Connor. When confronted with this discovery, Ms. Williams finally revealed the full story. "Your grandmother sent it anonymously to the school before leaving for the Philippines. She wanted to leave a piece of herself behind, even if no one knew it was here." The piano became even more precious to Maya, a tangible connection to her family's musical legacy in Boston. Each time she played it, she felt as though her fingers were conversing with her grandmother's across time and distance. Meanwhile, Robert worked tirelessly to arrange Margaret's journey to America. Medical visas, transportation with appropriate accommodations for her condition, coordinating with specialists, the logistics were daunting, but his determination never wavered. "It's the least I can do after all these years," he told Maya's father during one of their planning calls. "I want to make amends while there's still time." The family's reunion was planned for Thanksgiving, quintessentially American holiday that seemed perfectly appropriate for bringing together relatives separated by oceans and misunderstandings. As the festival approached, Maya's confidence occasionally wavered under the pressure. During one particularly difficult practice session, she burst into tears of frustration. "I can't do this," she exclaimed, slamming her hands on the keys. "What if I disappoint everyone? What if I'm not good enough?" Mrs. Peterson, who had been supervising the practice, sat beside her on the bench. "Maya, do you know why music touches people so deeply?" The girl shook her head, wiping away tears. "Because it isn't about perfection, it's about connection. When you play from your heart, you're not just performing. You're inviting listeners into a conversation. And you, my dear, have so much to say." That conversation grew larger when Simone Jackson, a renowned pianist who had once been Margaret's student in Boston, attended one of Maya's rehearsals. The famous musician had seen the Boston Globe article and immediately recognized the unique techniques that could only have come from Margaret Connor. "Your phrasing, your touch, it's uncanny," Simone told Maya after listening to her play Bach's Prelude in C major. "Margaret taught me that same interpretation 30 years ago. She always said Bach wasn't meant to be played like a mathematical exercise, but like a prayer." With Simone's endorsement, Maya received an invitation to perform at Symphony Hallen, honor rarely extended to someone so young. The pressure mounted, but so did the support system around her. Robert coordinating her grandmother's travel, Ms. Williams sharing stories that connected Maya to her American roots, Mrs. Peterson refining her technique, and Simone offering professional guidance that bridged generations of musical knowledge. What no one anticipated was how quickly news would spread through Boston's tight-knit musical community. People who remembered Margaret Connor began reaching out, former classmates, professors, students, each with their own stories about the Pearl of Boston, who had disappeared into a life abroad. As Thanksgiving approached, Maya worked on a special composition, an original piece that would combine elements of classical Western music with traditional Filipino melodies, creating a musical bridge between her two worlds. She titled it Homecoming, dedicating it to the grandmother she hoped would soon hear her play on American soil once again. The Tuesday before Thanksgiving brought heavy snow to Boston, unusual for November. Maya pressed her face against the window of Robert's car as they drove to Logan Airport, fascinated by the swirling white flakes that transformed the landscape into something from a holiday card. "Will the snow stop Lola's plane?" she asked anxiously. Robert checked the flight tracker on his phone. "No, they're still on schedule, just delayed by an hour." He reached over to squeeze her hand. "She'll be here soon, Maya." After 30 years, what's another hour? The international terminal buzzed with holiday travelers, but Maya stood perfectly still, eyes fixed on the arrival gate. When the doors finally opened and passengers began streaming through, her heart pounded so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. And then there she was. Seated in a wheelchair pushed by Maya's father, Margaret Connor looked smaller than Maya remembered, more fragile. But her eyes were bright and alert, scanning the crowd until they locked onto Maya's. Something electric passed between them, a recognition that transcended the physical changes of time. "Lola!" Maya broke into a run, navigating through the crowd until she reached her grandmother. The embrace was gentle but fierce, both of them crying openly. Margaret's right hand, her good hand since the stroke stroked Maya's hair. "My little songbird," she whispered. "Playing for America, just as I once did." When she looked up and saw her brother standing a few feet away, Margaret's breath caught. Robert had aged, his hair now silver, lines etched around his eyes, but he was unmistakably the boy she had grown up with, sharing a piano bench and dreams of musical greatness. "Robbie," she said, using his childhood nickname. He knelt beside her wheelchair, taking her hand in both of his. "Maggie, I'm so sorry. For everything." She shook her head, cutting off his apology. "We both made choices. What matters is now." The drive to Cape Cod was filled with gentle conversation, bridging decades of separation with careful questions and thoughtful answers. Margaret marveled at the changes in the Massachusetts landscape, pointing out landmarks to Maya, creating connections between past and present. Robert's house, the old Connor family home, stood on a bluff overlooking the Atlantic, its weathered shingles and white trim unchanged since Margaret had last seen it. Inside, however, he had made one significant modification. The grand piano from their childhood now faced east, toward the ocean, positioned exactly where Margaret had always wished it could be. "Mother never would allow it here," she said softly, as Robert wheeled her into the music room. "She said the salt air would damage the strings." "Mother isn't here anymore," Robert replied gently, and some things are more important than perfect preservation. When Maya sat at the familiar instrument and began to play a piece Margaret had composed in her youth, the circle seemed complete. 3 generations of musicians reunited through circumstance and choice, sharing the language that had both separated and now united them. After dinner, as Maya helped with dishes, Margaret and Robert sat on the porch despite the cold, bundled in blankets, watching the snow fall on the ocean waves. "She's extraordinary," Robert said, "more talented than either of us ever was." Margaret nodded. "She plays with freedom. No expectations weighing her down, no family legacy to uphold, just pure love of music. I wish we had had that." "We did, once, before the competitions and the pressure. Remember playing duets just for fun?" Robert smiled at the memory. "I miss those days. They don't have to be just memories, Robbie." Margaret's good hand reached for his. "We still have time." The International Piano Festival coincided with the first snowfall of December, transforming Boston into a winter wonderland. For Maya, the timing seemed perfectly orchestrated, nature itself, providing the backdrop for what would be the most important performance of her young life. In the weeks since Margaret's arrival, Maya had blossomed under her grandmother's guidance. Despite the physical limitations from her stroke, Margaret's musical knowledge remained sharp and comprehensive. She would sit beside Maya during practice sessions, occasionally demonstrating phrases with her right hand or singing passages to illustrate the emotional quality she sought. "Music isn't in the fingers," she often reminded Maya. "It's in the heart and mind. The fingers just follow." The festival's preliminary rounds went smoothly, with Maya advancing to the finals alongside pianists much older and more experienced. Her unique programming pairing, traditional classical repertoire with Filipino compositions rarely heard in Western concert halls, caught the attention of both judges and audiences. But perhaps the most meaningful development occurred away from the spotlight. Robert had arranged for Margaret to visit Lincoln Academy, where she was reunited with the Steinway she had donated anonymously 3 decades earlier. "You knew," she said to Ms. Williams when she saw the piano again. "You knew all along it was mine." The elderly custodian smiled. "The moment I heard Maya play it, I was certain. Some connections transcend time." Principal Jenkins, recognizing the historical significance of the moment, organized a special assembly where Margaret shared stories of her musical journey with the students. Despite her soft voice and occasional search for English words, having spoken primarily Filipino for decades, she captivated the young audience with tales of dedication, cultural exchange, and following one's own path. "My greatest regret," she told them, "was allowing pride to separate me from my family. Music should build bridges, not walls." For the festival finals, Maya had chosen Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor, the piece she had played on her first day at Lincoln, paired with her original composition, Homecoming. The symmetry wasn't lost on anyone who had witnessed her journey over these months. The night before the competition, Maya couldn't sleep. She crept downstairs in Robert's house to find her grandmother already at the piano, her right hand picking out a gentle melody. "Lola, you should rest." Margaret patted the bench beside her. "Some things are more important than rest, Anak. Sit with me." They sat in companionable silence for a moment before Margaret spoke again. "Tomorrow when you play, don't think about winning, but I want to make you proud. You already have more than you can imagine." Margaret's eyes were bright in the dim light. "Play for connection, not perfection. Music is about bringing people together across all boundaries, time, culture, language, even family disagreements." Maya leaned her head against her grandmother's shoulder. "Is that why you sent your piano to the school? To stay connected to Boston? Perhaps. Or perhaps I was leaving something for the future, without even knowing what that future might be." She smiled. "I certainly never imagined my granddaughter would one day play it." The morning of the finals brought unexpected news. Simone Jackson, who had become Maya's champion in the Boston music scene, arrived at Robert's house with an extraordinary offer. "The New England Conservatory is launching a cultural heritage in music program," she explained. "We want Maya to be our first young artist in residence, studying both Western classical and Filipino traditional music. And," she added, turning to Margaret, "we would be honored if you would consider a visiting professorship, sharing your unique perspective on cross-cultural musical education." The offer represented everything Margaret had once dreamed of: recognition of her musical philosophy, acknowledgement of the value in cultural exchange, and an opportunity to bridge the worlds she had always straddled. That it would allow her to stay near her brother and granddaughter made it even more perfect. "I'm not the pianist I once was," she cautioned, holding up her weakened left hand. "We're not asking you to perform," Simone assured her. "We're asking you to teach, to share your wisdom. Some knowledge can only come from having lived between worlds as you have." That evening, as Maya took the stage at the competition finals, she looked out at the audience, her grandmother and great-uncle sitting side by side in the front row, Ms. Williams and Mrs. Peterson behind them, her father recording everything to share with her mother back in Manila. Family, in all its complex forms, united by music. She began to play. The Boston Globe headline read, "Cultural Harmony Filipino-American Prodigy wins International Piano Festival with groundbreaking performance." The accompanying photograph showed Maya at the piano, her expression one of complete absorption in the music, while in the background, barely visible but unmistakably present, sat Margaret Connor, her face illuminated with pride. The victory brought more than just recognition. It crystallized the path forward for everyone involved. The New England Conservatory's offer was formally extended and accepted, with arrangements made for Maya's parents to visit regularly from the Philippines. Robert converted the east wing of his Cape Cod home into an apartment for Margaret, providing both proximity and independence as she recovered her strength. Ms. Williams, whose quiet preservation of Margaret's legacy had made all of this possible, was honored at a special ceremony at Lincoln Academy, where a scholarship was established in her name for students demonstrating exceptional musical talent regardless of background or circumstances. "I never sought recognition," she protested, when Principal Jenkins informed her of the honor. "I was just keeping a promise to a friend." "Sometimes keeping promises changes lives," the principal replied. "Yours certainly has." For Maya, the months following the competition were filled with adjustments and growth. Attending the conservatory's special program while maintaining her studies at Lincoln required careful scheduling and dedication. The language barrier gradually dissolved as her English improved, though she maintained her Filipino vocabulary through daily calls with her mother and regular practice with Margaret, who insisted they keep their cultural connections strong. On a crisp spring day, as cherry blossoms transformed Boston Common into a pink-hued wonderland, Maya received an unexpected package from her mother, her grandmother's journals, from the years immediately after leaving Boston. The handwritten pages revealed Margaret's early struggles in the Philippines, her determination to build a musical bridge between cultures, and her quiet hope that someday her American and Filipino lives might reconnect. "She never stopped loving both worlds," Maya told Robert as they sat on his porch, watching waves crash against the Cape Cod shore. "Even when it seemed impossible to belong to both." "That's the Connor stubbornness," he replied with a smile. "Once we decide something matters, we never really let it go." The true culmination of their journey came during the end-of-year recital at the conservatory. Maya had composed a special piece titled "Three Hands Playing," written specifically to accommodate Margaret's limited mobility. The composition allowed grandmother and granddaughter to perform together, with Maya handling the complex left-hand parts, while Margaret contributed the expressive melody lines with her stronger right hand. As they took their positions at the piano, Margaret seated slightly behind Maya, both of them facing the gleaming black Steinway hush, fell over the audience. This wasn't just a performance. It was the physical embodiment of reconciliation, of barriers overcome, of music's power to heal divisions that words could not bridge. The piece began softly, almost tentatively, like a conversation between strangers. Gradually, as Maya's left hand provided a steady foundation, Margaret's right hand gained confidence, introducing Filipino melodic patterns that intertwined with classical Western harmonies. The music built in complexity and emotion, sometimes questioning, sometimes answering, always connected despite the different voices. In the front row, Robert watched with tears streaming unashamedly down his face. Beside him sat Ms. Williams, her gnarled hands clasped tightly in her lap, witnessing the culmination of a story she had helped preserve through decades of patient waiting. Behind them, Mrs. Peterson followed the score with professional appreciation, while around them, members of Boston's musical community who had once known the young Margaret Connor marveled at how life had come full circle. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of perfect silence, that sacred space after music ends, but before the world rushes back in. Then, As one, the audience rose to their feet in thunderous applause. Later that evening, as the extended family gathered at Robert's house for a celebration dinner, Maya slipped away to the music room. She found her grandmother already there, sitting at the piano, her fingers resting lightly on the keys without pressing them. "Are you happy, Lola?" Maya asked, settling beside her on the bench. Margaret looked out the window where the last light of day painted the ocean in shades of gold and purple. Then she turned to her granddaughter, the living bridge between her past and future, between the countries and cultures that had shaped her life. "I am home," she said simply, "in all the ways that matter." Maya nodded, understanding completely. Home wasn't a single place or a perfect situation. It was the harmony created when different parts of life were finally allowed to exist together, each enriching the other, creating something more beautiful than either could produce alone. She placed her hands on the keys beside her grandmother's and began to play a gentle accompaniment to the melody that Margaret started. No sheet music, no audience, no pressure, just the pure joy of making music together, the way it was always meant to be. Outside, as twilight deepened into evening, the sound of the piano carried across the water, notes falling like stars onto the listening waves.